Hey everyone, Rho here. Today we are talking the missing Primarch of the Salamanders, Vulkan, and just how maybe a certain Fabius Bile could be an important part of his future narrative. General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we are discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe, so you have been warned. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Now, I've had a few people ask me to do a what if their particular Primarch return topic, updated to the premise of the probable unremembered Empire revelation we're expecting, as we discussed a few weeks ago. And we will be, guys, we'll do one for each of the Primarchs. You know me, I just like to put some real thought into these things before we discuss it. However, in refreshing my memory on certain things and diving into particular areas, I've really come to feel that perhaps Vulkan's hunt for Fabius Bile may yet prove an important part for his possible return. Now, back in 8th edition, the first founding chapters all received their own codex supplement, and I was absolutely elated by this. To finally see the more forgotten chapters such as the Salamanders and White Scars etc. all get some much needed love and attention. Something outside just the big boys such as the Ultramarines. And the interesting thing for me, in particular for the Salamanders in their supplement, was the highlight of Vulkan's hunt for Fabius Bile. Now, the Scouring, we know, is going to be the series of novels following on from the Horus Heresy series, so things are obviously going to be explored in much greater detail when we reach those novels, and as ever subject to possible changes. However, as it stands, the Scouring will be the revenge of the Imperium, as the traitors are driven back across the galaxy. And the Salamanders, for their part, will be unable to take centre stage on this grand undertaking due to the shattering of their legion at the betrayal of Istvan. The Salamanders, as we know, alongside the Iron Hands and Raven Guard, were absolutely decimated as a legion at the hands of Horus Lupercal and his fellow traitor legions. However, the hunt for Fabius Bile is something we are told that the Salamanders absolutely could do. Now, anybody that knows Vulkan would know that he would be beyond appalled at the depraved acts and experimentations of Bile and his legion kin. And it's made clear in the supplement that when Vulkan found out just what Bile had been up to, especially during the Siege of Terror, he's absolutely apocalyptically angry. And thus we are given a brief overview and rundown of just how Vulkan and his newly christened chapter went about chasing down Bile across the remains of the Imperium. And like I said before, with the Scouring series still yet to come, I wouldn't get hung up on any particular details of events we are told right now, as they could well be changed and adapted in the future to come. And they most likely will be. However, there is one thing that most certainly will not change, and that is the effect that this pursuit has on Vulkan himself. We know Vulkan is by far and away the most caring and compassionate of all the Primarchs, said by his brothers to be the closest to their father's vision of the Imperium after the Great Crusade. And so it cannot be understated just how much of a period of recovery the Scouring truly is. The moment Horus dies and the traitor legions flee Terror, that doesn't mean it's suddenly all sunshine and rainbows for the rest of the Imperium. Much of it, if not all of it, has been devastated by the forces of the War Master. This was a slow and violent procession towards the throne world, and any world not celebrating Horus and overthrowing their loyalties to the Emperor faced the full wrath of the traitor Legion's forces, and any world embracing their new saviours instead soon found themselves inflicted with all the maladies of heresy and chaos worship. The Siege of Terror, for its part, was simply the eye of the storm. And I wanted to make the point of saying that because in this hunt for bile, it really makes great effort to lay clear just how hard this was for Vulkan. Of course, we're not talking physically here, but emotionally, mentally. Every sector the Salamanders entered, every system they chased the rumours and evidence of Fabius bile, they were overwhelmed with calls for aid, with pleas for help. The people of the Imperium calling out to the son of the Emperor for his salvation. And Vulkan, each and every time, has to turn those pleas aside, continuing his chase. Now, if you're wondering why, then again there's really not much of a Salamanders Legion left in the aftermath of the heresy. Vulkan just doesn't have the manpower to be able to dedicate forces to all these cries for help. There's a reason Guilliman and his successors take the forefront of the storyline here. And even if Vulkan was to become involved with his forces in a particular system, that would mean Bile is left to enact even worse atrocities elsewhere. So Vulkan really has no option but to simply continue his pursuit. He can't do both things. And the reason this is important is again because of the mentality of the Primarch we're talking about here. If this was Guilliman, or a Russ, or even a Sanguinius, heck, any of his loyal brothers, these calls for aid having to be turned aside would hurt, no doubt, but they wouldn't scar, figuratively speaking at least. But for Vulkan, I really feel each and every one of those pleas he is going to hear, and each and every one of those voices will cut him deeply, and they will leave their scar. I really feel this storyline is going to be integral to Vulkan's future. As it stands, Vulkan's absence is largely left as one of the more mysterious disappearances, fairly similar to his brother Russ, in that he wanders off claiming to return one day when he's needed most. And I am almost certain this will change somehow when we reach that point in the Scouring series. And honestly, it probably should do, because in my opinion it doesn't really fit the character of Vulkan as much as it does Russ. Regardless, this storyline to me has been introduced for a reason, and ultimately we know Vulkan's quarry will escape, as Bile is still quite happily strutting his stuff, continuing his experiments within the current 40k timeline. So Vulkan merely giving up the pursuit or chase really doesn't make a lot of sense, much less considering it's Vulkan, with him witnessing the atrocities that Bile has committed. With him having spurned calls for aid from world after world, turning his back on the people of the Imperium, there is absolutely no way Vulkan would simply end his chase. Now, there is one possible solution to this that I can see, and that is to actually have Vulkan catch and kill Fabius bile. Fabius, we know, loves to pull a Palpatine and transfers his consciousness to cloned bodies in the result of his death. which is actually something he's having to do on a regular basis in the current timeline, due to the process degrading more each time he does it. So, Vulkan could catch and claim his quarry, departing happy he has cleansed this filth from the galaxy. All the while, unknown to him, Bile is alive and kicking elsewhere. And by the time he reappears on the Imperium's most wanted list, Vulkan could be MIA somewhere else. And this would work in the sense of giving Vulkan a complete story central to the Scouring series, showing us the scars and the effects of the heresy and Scouring have left on him, and not only him but the people of the Imperium, which Vulkan represents more than any of his brothers. But his story would also then be resolved in time for his reappearance in the time of the War of the Beast. In having believed he has cleansed bile from the galaxy, it would make sense for Vulkan to be upon Caldera fulfilling his oath. Now, does this address his simple disappearance? No. However, that may not change at all. It could simply remain as it always has. As with many of the Primarchs' disappearances, we aren't luxury at the moment to know the actual time of these events. So perhaps Vulkan could take the quest for bile on as a lone vow. Seeing the need for his chapter to answer these pleas for aid, we could see them playing on his mind and heart until he is no longer able to turn a blind eye. And as such, he sends his sons back to be the defender of humanity, the defender of the people of the Imperium they were always supposed to be, while he ends his chase for bile alone. Which I could see working. Regardless of how this will transpire, like I said, we know Bile is still alive and well, and if anything more infamous now for his actions than ever before, having even recently captured Custodes to continue his experiments upon. So it would certainly make sense that if we ever get to see the return of Vulkan, it absolutely has to be tied to Fabius Bile. There is no way Vulkan would live knowing this creature has escaped his wrath, that he has not paid for his crimes he committed. So somehow, some way, surely Vulkan has to learn of Bile's continued existence, his continued blight upon the galaxy, and maybe just then we'll see the return of the Salamanders Primarch to finally complete his vow and give justice to the people of the Imperium. But as always guys, what do you think? For me, like I said, I really see the War of the Beast being a bit of a tie around Vulkan's future storylines, as I really don't see a retcon coming down the pipeline. So whatever Vulkan's story is in the Scouring, it really has to be completed more than any of his brothers. So I really think that may be why we have been introduced to Vulkan's hunt for Fabius. It's something that could really be begun and ended within the Scouring timeline. Vulkan will be able to catch and end his quarry without it really affecting anything going forward. Fabius can simply resurrect in a new clone body as we know he does, and Vulkan can depart to fulfill his oaths to the Imperium. It could actually be a truly great way of showing us the scars that have built up on Vulkan's mentality, and whether planned or not, be the perfect way of reintroducing him some 10,000 years later. But as always, leave your thoughts in the comments below, I love to read them. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.